Oh, hey folks, welcome back to KEI Fabrication. Alright folks, I just made the front shackles for the leaf springs, the transverse leaf springs up front. I'm assuming that this is from original Ford straight axle, and that's what Roger had made all of these from. And these were, not that there was anything wrong with this is the way things were done in a hurry, but certainly effective. And I figured, well, A couple of them had some issues with some chunks missing out of them and tweaked a little bit. So I made some out of some 1/4-inch material. Now you saw me cut these out of angle iron. It's the only 1/4-inch material I had laying around. So it's kind of true to form of how things were done originally. And now we have a full set of 4. Now the last step here is to give them a quick sand to get rid of the boiler skin and whatever surface rust is on them, and then I'll give them a coat of semi-gloss black. Just 4 shackles made from material, not just the correct width flat stock. I probably got an hour invested in these, so everything takes time. That's one of the things that is discouraging with YouTube for me is, you know, you look at this great stuff that's being done and you say, oh boy, I could do that, that won't take me long, and then you go to the shop and you try to do it, and you know, you got 2, 3, 4 hours into something that looks like it would take you maybe a half hour. And I've always been very, very terrible at estimating how much time it takes me to do stuff. And you know, I look at this, I look at that, I come up with an idea, that'll only take me a little while or a few minutes, and next thing you know, a week's gone by and I've only got 2 or 3 of a dozen things accomplished. So obviously there's the unknowns that you run into, the variables that throw into the equation. Alright, that's enough yammering. I'm going to give these a quick sand, throw them outside, blow some gloss black on them, they'll be ready to install. Okay, so I came to a standstill on the rear end assembly. So we switched over to the front end. You saw me just make the shackles. Originally, this was the bushing that was inside here, and this was the bushing that went inside the leaf spring. So I ordered some bronze flanged bushings, and I've got brand new 1/2-inch bolts that'll go in the new shackles. The inboard spring eye goes into this bracket here, and I tighten this up, but the bolts in the previous race car were cut off with a torch, and they kind of blew into the bracketry. So to put the integrity back into the bolt hole, I made a 3/16 thick washer, and I sanded everything down. I'm going to weld that up in a minute. These were just sharp corners. I just took the grinder while I was in here real quick and radiused all 4 corners. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole in this, and I'm going to put a tube in here and then weld the tube up just to get rid of some of the deflection in this plate. The other thing, to get rid of some of the problems with the bronze or brass bushings that was in the leaf springs previously, these fit perfectly in here, just a McMaster car item. So that saved me a lot of machining. And again, brand new grade 8 1/2-inch bolts. So that'll all go together quickly now, and I'll put the new bushings inside where the shackles pivot from here. So I'm going to weld this up and modify the center of this, get that welded up. Once the shackles dry and I'm done welding here, I think I can put the leaf springs in for the final time. That would be really cool. It would be ready to set down on the ground. So that's the goal for at least this morning anyway. Well, as I'm getting suited up to weld, this is the 4th day in a row that's been 90 degrees in the shop and 80-some% humidity. And it's been tough. Just had a big delivery from McMaster Car. These are all bolts for the quick change. This holds the axle tubes on to the center section. Got these reduced diameter washers to go under the quick change gear cover, and also for the side bells that bolt on. Grade 8 bolts for the front suspension. And we got a fresh stick of Delrin to make whatever bushings we might need. Okay, so we got the front leaf springs assembled and the new shackles, the bolts, the bushings are installed. When I was putting it together and testing the travel, I realized that the front horns here of the frame rail are at a slight upward angle, even with the car sitting perfectly level, and what that means is the brackets for the spring, that receiver, has them tilted also. Well, the way that this bracket was attached to the frame and the way these arms were made, the axle was straight up and down and the springs were at an angle, and it was putting the shackles into bind. Well, that was actually kind of good news, because I really wanted to add caster, which is the angle of the kingpin, top tilted back towards the rear. I wanted to add caster so when you turn the wheel, it gains camber. And when I took it out of this bracket, this is the arm, the header's kind of in the way. When I took it out of that bracket and dropped it below, everything fell into place. The overhead hoist is holding it pretty much at ride height, and I know that because we've got 2.5 inches of clearance between the axle beam and the frame rail. So by adding caster, which I wanted, it didn't have it up to this point. It made the geometry of the springs and the shackles kind of in their neutral position and give it that flexibility so it's not all bound up when the suspension compresses. So the goal is now, I'm going to have to pop the headers off real quick, cut these brackets off, and I'm going to make new brackets that go from the bottom of the frame to hold the heim joint. I'm going to make it a wide bracket so I can maybe put some spacers in there to add a little more or take some away. So, not something that I anticipated on doing or having to do, but every time I walk by the car and I look at the front end and I'm thinking about how do you make a straight axle front end handle as good as it can for left-hand turns, caster is something that I've always been concerned about, and believe it or not, my thought process was actually to do exactly what I'm doing here. What I'm happy about, not that I want to do more work or undo what Roger had done, what I'm happy about is that the performance setting for the front axle beam and giving me some caster actually is going to solve the problem with a little tiny bit of bind that was happening relative to the spring hanger, spring eye, and the wishbone connection. Alright, enough yammering, let's get to work. Alright, I got a tremendous amount of work to do here, so I'm going to start out slow and taper off.